Hello, and welcome back to General Science. Um, Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about DNA in our next step of our talks about biology. And here we go. Here's what DNA looks like for the most part. This is the double helix. And we're going to take a look at what DNA is all about today. So, get started. DNA stands for deoxyribose nucleic acid. So it's a molecule that's in our bodies. It is an acid, and this is the chemical substance, and it's present in the nucleus of all cells in all living organisms. So any living thing that's on planet Earth has this chemical substance in it. DNA controls all the chemical changes which take place in cells. So anything that happens in a cell, the DNA is what's controlling all of that. It's what's telling the cell what to do. And the kind of cell which is formed, like a muscle cell or a blood cell or a nerve cell, is also controlled by DNA. The kind of organism which is produced, right, buttercups, giraffes, herrings, humans, whatever, is also controlled by DNA. So DNA, although it's one type of molecule, it can create many different types of cells and organisms. DNA is a very large molecule, and it's made up of chains of subunits. So it's like a really long chain, and each little link is a subunit. Those subunits are called nucleotides, and each nucleotide is made up of a sugar called deoxyribose, a phosphate group, which is phosphorus with 4 oxygens attached to it, and an organic base. So those are the 3 things that make up a nucleotide. Ribose is like glucose, but it only has 5 carbon atoms in its molecule. Glucose has 6, ribose has 5. Deoxyribose is basically the same, but there's 1 less oxygen atom on it, so it's a little bit different than regular ribose. That's why they call it deoxyribose, because it's lost an oxygen atom. And both molecules are represented by this pentagon here. So they use pentagons to represent 5 carbon circles like that. They use hexagons for 6. So the bases, there are common ones, and the 4 that we see the most in DNA are adenine, which is A, thymine, which is T, cytosine, which is C, and guanine, which is G. Those are the 4 common organic bases that you're going to find in DNA, and they're the ones that write the genetic code. So here's deoxyribose and the phosphate and one of the bases. So over here we've got our phosphate and we've got our sugar, and then here's our base, adenine. And they make 1 nucleotide. So a molecule of DNA is formed by millions of these nucleotides joined together in a chain. As you can see, the sugar and the phosphate creates this kind of ladder, and then each base is in the center there. So DNA usually consists of a double strand of nucleotides. So the sugar-phosphate chains are on the outside, and the nucleotides are in the middle, bonding together, and it makes a kind of ladder. So this is what 2-stranded DNA would look like. As you can see, we've got our bases attached, and we've got this double strand of phosphates. So these bases are always paired up in the same way. So adenine always forms a bond with thymine, and cytosine and guanine always bond together. So if there's a cytosine on one side, there's going to be a guanine on the other side, and vice versa. So you can predict what's going to be on the other side based on which bases you see on the left. So on the left there's an adenine, so there's going to be a thymine. And then there's a cytosine, so there will be a guanine. And then there's a thymine, so we get an A. So there they all are pairing up, making our chain again. Okay, so those paired strands are coiled into a spiral, which is called the double helix. And the double helix looks like this. You have the sugar-phosphate chain on the outside, and the bases are in the middle. And this coil really helps it kind of shrink down to a size that's manageable to fit into cells. This is a DIY model of what it might look like. So you can see science teachers have gotten really creative, made their own versions. Now, before a cell divides, the DNA strands have to unwind and separate. And each strand is going to make a new partner by adding the appropriate nucleotides. This is called replication. The result is that there are going to be now 2 double-stranded DNA molecules in the nucleus, so that when the cell divides, each nucleus contains identical DNA. So when we talked about cell division last time, we had to talk about how the DNA is going to be doubled. And this is the replication step. So this is when that DNA is doubled, you're going to get 2 full strands of DNA. So like I said, the strands are going to separate, and then each strand is going to build up its partner by adding the appropriate nucleotides. So each side is going to get new sets so that they have 2 identical strands. If you see on both sides here, they're the same, right? So there is a sequence. The sequence of bases in DNA is what forms the genetic code. So a group of 3 bases, which is called a triplet, controls the production of a particular amino acid in the cell. So the different amino acids and the order in which they are joined up determines what kind of thing is going to be made, what kind of protein is going to be made from that DNA. So here's a small imaginary protein. Okay, we've got all these different amino acids. Okay, and they've bonded in sort of shape. Okay, and each one of these amino acids is coded for by a different triplet of bases. So for example, here's the code for valine, CGA. Okay, or sorry, CAT. CGA codes for alanine. Now, those are different amino acids. So this is known as the triplet code, and each triplet codes for a specific amino acid, like I said. So if you took a look at these right here, if you know what you were talking about and you've studied and you know what the triplet code is, you can figure out exactly what amino acids are going to go in what order. And those amino acids would be joined together in the correct sequence and they'd make part of a protein, and that protein would do something in your body. There they are again. Now they're a protein. Okay. The proteins build the cell structures, and they also can make enzymes. And enzymes are things that help chemical reactions take place. So they make sure that the chemical reactions in your body are going appropriately. The structures and reactions in the cell determine what sort of cell it is and what its function is. And so DNA exerts its control through these enzymes. So when it creates enzymes, it's controlling what the cell can do. So a sequence of triplets in your DNA molecule may code for a complete protein. And that sequence is a gene. So a gene is something that codes for a particular protein. And there could be 1,000 or more bases in one gene, or there could be a lot less. We've got some quiz questions here. We're going to